This is just a random story that has absolutely nothing to do about anything, okay? So I apologize. I'm not going crazy. I just thought this was kind of a cute story. There was this priest one time who was pastor of this rather large parish, and he had to hire a secretary for the parish. And so he diligently did his interviews and such, and one woman who came in was pretty familiar to him. She was a parishioner, and she came to daily mass, and she was pretty actively involved and such, and she interviewed very well, and so he decided to hire her. And so he kind of taught her and trained her what to do, to answer the phone and to kind of take messages and take care of the books and the sacramental records and all these different things that a parish secretary does. And she's doing very, very well. And after about a year, one evening, the priest is in his office doing some work. He just finished up with a couple appointments and kind of finishing some things, and he ran out of paper clips, and he needed paper clips. And so he went searching for paper clips, and he looked in the closet, and there was nothing. So he figured that maybe his secretary in her desk someplace will have paper clips. And so he went rummaging through her desk and looking for paper clips and couldn't find any. And he opened one drawer at the bottom and there was nothing in it, except for there was a container with an egg carton container with 3 eggs in it and a bundle of $1 bills. And he could not figure this out, what was going on. And so the next day when the secretary came in, he says, "I'm just kind of curious, what's with this drawer?" And she says, "Well, it's kind of embarrassing, but I'll tell you, Father, that whenever you give a bad homily, I put an egg in there." And he's like, "Oh, well, you've been here for a year and there's only 3, so that's not so bad." He's figuring he's kind of doing pretty good, actually, because she goes to daily mass and, all these different things and weekends. And so 3 in a year, that's pretty good. He says, "Well, what about the cash, all those $1 bills?" And she says, "Well, when I got a dozen, I'd sell them for $1." My mother told me that story. Can you believe it? Yes. I don't know if she was trying to tell me something, but anyway, random story has nothing to do with anything. But it's kind of cute, isn't it? I agree. This weekend we celebrate the Ascension, and whenever I think comes around to the Ascension, I always think of this person that I knew when I was in Mason City. Her name was Joan Wilder, and she was a kindergarten teacher. In fact, she taught kindergarten for 40 years. Can you imagine being in a classroom confined with 20 individuals, 8 hours a day, 180 days a week, with kids who are 5 and 6 years old for 40 years? If she doesn't have a place in heaven, then there's not hope for any of us. But anyway, so she was really good at what she did. I mean, she was just an excellent teacher and just well respected and very good at what she did. But she always had this thing at the very beginning of the school year. At Newman and Mason City, they had the custom that parents, when they brought their kids in the first day of school, everybody gathered in the playground in the parking lot in the front. They did not go into the building. They just kind of dropped their kids off, took their pictures, and took the pictures with the teacher, and then the kids went and played and such, and then the bell rang, and all the kids would line up with their class. And Mrs. Wilder would gather all of her little kindergartners, and as parents of kindergartners, you do this. Boy, it's so hard to see them go on that first day and to let them go. And so they would all just sort of stand there and be weeping and crying and such. And Mrs. Wilder would take all of her kids, turn them around and say, "There's your mom and dad over there. Now wave goodbye." And all of the kids would wave, and she'd take them into the building. And the parents would weep and cry and everything. Eventually, they'd go home. But it was, in a sense, kind of first time I saw that, I'm like, that really is tough. For parents to, in a sense, kind of send your kid into that environment for the first time. You put a child, if you think of a kindergartner, for many of them, this is the first time that they've interacted with some of these other people. Maybe it's sometimes the first time they've interacted with people outside of the family. It depends on the situation and such. It is emotionally probably very difficult for the kid and for the parent. There is kind of a separation, if you will. But it's an important separation. Because parents, really, you're not raising kids, you're raising adults. You know, the point is that the kids grow and develop and they become more independent and eventually they go out on their own and they, in a sense, kind of learn to sink or swim in the world by themselves. That's the way it's supposed to work, correct? And so Mrs. Wilder saying, wave goodbye, she's basically saying it's time to separate. It's time for us to go in now, and we begin without them. In a sense, that's what the ascension to me is about. Jesus, after the resurrection, kept showing up. You know, the disciples were, remember, locked in the upper room for fear that they were going to be next and what was going to happen. But eventually, you know, Jesus kind of came to the point and to the realization, or whatever you want to say, that, you know, they have to go out and do this on their own. I cannot keep showing up. And so the ascension is an essential part of salvation history because it is really the disciples going out, and now they can do this. Jesus is saying, I'm leaving. It's time for you to go. It's time for you to begin to, in a sense, kind of begin what I taught you, the witness that I gave to you. You need to witness to others now. And that's the way the church has worked. You know, thousands of years later, here we are. I mean, obviously they were successful because we're sitting here tonight. But if Jesus kept showing up, would they have ever done that? You know? To me, that's what the ascension is about. It's about the boldness of God saying, you can do this. You can do this. And that really is what he says to each and every one of us. And so by our witnesses in our lives, by our prayer and by our works of charity and various things that we do, we are saying to the world, we are Christians. And Jesus is with us. That's a powerful witness. So to me, that's what the ascension is about. So think about the ascension this week. What does it mean for you? What does it mean for you to be a witness? What does it mean for you to bring the good news, like the disciples did, into the world?